Rotoscoping is a method of capturing motion by tracing from the frames of a film or a video. Max Fleischer invented the first rotoscoping machine, and he created the first rotoscoped animation in 1917 in New York City. He created the character Coco the Clown by rotoscoping his brother Dave dancing in a clown suit. For this lesson, you will import a video file to the stage and then trace it. When the welcome screen appears, you want to create a new ActionScript 3.0. You want to change the frame rate, so go ahead and use the tool. Edit the document properties. Change the frame rate to 12 frames per second. Turn on autosave so it doesn't interrupt you. And say OK. I'm going to fit the stage in window. Now the first thing you do, import a video to trace from. Let's save the file, and to make sure it's going into the correct folder. And this one is going to be 05 tutorial with your initials. Make sure it's going into the right folder and then say save. You want to select the first keyframe. You want to file, import video. File, import video. Now I have provided you with an FLV file that you will trace from. So use the Where is your video file on your computer. Browse, and then you've got to go to find where it is. It's called Greyhound FLV, and this is the British spelling of Greyhound, Greyhound. Open. In the second part of this, in the dialog box, you want to embed the FLV in SWF and play in timeline. Okay, now we're going to go to next. You don't need to include audio because there is no audio, but you do want to place the instance on the stage and expand the timeline if needed. Next. And now it says finish video import. The video you are using is located at, and it will tell you the direction to go to find it. The video will be placed on the stage. The timeline will be expanded to accommodate the playback length. You come down here and say finish, and it puts it here, and you can see the whole thing when you scrub. That's what it's called when you drag the red line across the frames. It's scrubbing the frames. Now, this does not fill the frame. So first we want to file, save, make sure it's saved again. And I'm going to use my Align palette. Click on Align. Make sure that Align to Stage is selected. Okay. Transform. Let's lock the constraint and let's drag across to scale the height, and the width will go with it because we want to make sure that we can trace it as big as possible. And I'm going to Command S. Now I'm going to add a new layer above this layer. This is my Greyhound that I'm not going to be using once I've traced. And if you right click and come down to the word guide, that now will no longer show when you do make your movie. I'm going to lock it so I don't end up drawing on the layer by accident. But it's not going to render that to your SWF when you output it. On this layer, I'm going to put Greyhound because this is the one I'm going to actually draw my Greyhound on. Make sure that you've got your brush tool selected. So here's my brush tool, and I'm going to get a nice sort of a medium nib so it will show. Let's go with a sort of a warm brown. I think that looks nice. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to trace around the outside edge of the shape. Now there's no real definition to this picture. This is one of the first motion studies that Eadweard Muybridge made, and they really did not have very good film back then. It was difficult to get a lot of definition because the film was very, very rough. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to trace around the outer edge of the dog, and you don't have to fill it, just trace around. You can fill it after you're finished, but just trace around the outer edge of the dog. What we're trying to do is get sort of a contour gesture shape. So we want to see the motion and the kind of the silhouette of the shape right now. Now, because we want to draw a new picture on the next frame, we want to use F7. Remember, we want to make sure that we don't duplicate. What we want to do is add a new blank keyframe. And just keep drawing around the outer edge. Take as long as you need. Now if you can't keep up with me the first time through, you can always just watch and then you can do it when we're done with the exercise, or you can just draw along, because it's not necessary that you go as fast as me. You can just be drawing. You just need to remember things like click on the next frame, F7, and then draw. Now when you do go back to fill in the color, if the edge has a gap in it, Flash will not fill that shape. You can change the settings for the fill tool to make it close small, medium, or large gaps. But if you do that, it considers a gap any space between shapes. So if you have two lines that are close together, like in the tail or the legs, it might just leave an empty space there because it will consider this to be a gap. See right here between the tail there? It might fill this part and not go any further, or it might fill up to there and not go down the tail. So you have to be aware of those things. You can always just draw around the spaces where it looks like it might have a gap, or you can fill it with the medium-sized closed gaps, and then you can go back where you can see there's gaps left and you can use paint behind. There are a lot of different ways to deal with that. And there's no one right way to do anything. That's one thing you should remember in any kind of creative type of field. There's no one way to do anything right. There's a lot of bad ways to do things, but there's also a lot of good ways to do things. And what you really use and what you find the best and the most useful may not be what somebody else does. And what they do may not work for you at all. So don't feel like somebody has a right to tell you you're wrong about something. Just find the way that works for you. And if you have trouble with something, ask other people for advice. But don't take it personally, because everybody's got their own way. The only time I can think of in one of my classes when I felt somebody had actually done something the wrong way was when I had a student in a drawing class who drew the model. We were drawing from a live model. And he drew the top of her foot and the bottom of her foot as one line. So she had no foot, she just had a line. And he couldn't understand why her foot didn't look right. He was an engineering major, I think. He wasn't an art major. He had a little problem with spatial characteristics or something, I don't know. But that was just basically one of those strange aberrations. I don't know what was going on with him. He was kind of a funny guy. By the time he got out of the class, he could draw a foot, I think. But, you know, some people have a hard time with visual things. Anyway, but that didn't mean that it was the wrong way to draw it. It was just a very strange way to draw it. And it did really just didn't succeed on a lot of levels. So he was concerned about it, and I tried to help him with it. It was one of those interesting things. I'd never thought of a person who was having a foot that looked like a potato chip before. So now you see why I tell you for these tutorials I don't like to use a lot of frames per second, because if you were drawing 24 frames per second, this would take twice as long. And it would be very, very long. So, of course, if you were doing something that was supposed to be really important to your animation, you wouldn't mind putting in that much time. But just for a training exercise, it doesn't make sense. So that's why we do the tutorials for 12 frames per second. Getting real close to the end there. And this is the last frame. Now see, when you're going through this, you really can't tell which foot is in the foreground and which one is in the background. But when you play it, the motion looks extremely natural, and you don't ask questions in your mind. You just look at it and think, oh, there's a running dog. So This is the real interesting thing about motion and detail. Detail is important for things that are in one place. When things are moving, it's more the gesture that's important. There's sort of the general direction the motion is going. That's what's important. Okay, I'm going to save. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm looping here. And I'm going to play it. Looks pretty good. Okay. Go back to the beginning, save again. And let's fill in here, at least the frames that want to be filled in. Okay, and save again. And now, if we hold down Command and press Return, you can see what the actual movie looks like. And see, it does look very realistic somehow. It's amazing what that kind of thing can do. So that is the tutorial number 5, rotoscope.